Will Storr is a master storyteller and deep thinker whose work has captivated audiences worldwide. His insights into the human mind, particularly the role of status, feel like he's offered a cheat code to our lives. He's written 6 books, and his research spans 17 years, focusing on the neuroscience behind what drives a human on a day-to-day basis. He understands what leads to our deep insecurities and what it really takes to build a long-lasting relationship. In this discussion, Will peels back the layers of our innate drive for status and connection, revealing how these fundamental needs shape our identities, relationships, and our own sense of self. This conversation promises to challenge your assumptions and provide a roadmap to a fulfilling life. Before we get into it, I want to ask you for a favor. We want to make sure these impactful conversations get to as many people as possible. By subscribing to this channel, you help these conversations reach the people they need to. In return, if you're part of the first 20,000 subscribers, we're going to pick 10 of you to come down here to the We Need to Talk studio to meet me, the guests, and let us know who you'd like to see on the next show. Thank you. Okay, let's get into the conversation. So how would you define status?
Yeah, so status has a very bad reputation for various sort of evolutionary reasons. I think the useful way to see it is that status is our reward for being of value to the human family. So when we prove ourselves as being a valuable person, people see us as better, that we raise in status in their eyes. And so that's really all it is. And I think when people think of status, especially in this capitalist world we live in, they think of the Kardashians and,
Yes.
Or Logan Paul, or, people who are show-offs and, gaudy and loud. And that really isn't what status is about. Status is literally being of value, feeling like I'm valuable to other people, being respected by other people. Nobody likes to be disrespected. Nobody likes to be called a rude name.
Right.
That's really all it is. We all like to feel that we are valuable in some important way.
And I've seen in your writing that you've suggested that it's about feeling valuable with those nearest and dearest to us.
Yeah, that's right. So we play status games with the people around us. So we worry most about our reputation in the eyes of people that are sort of close to us in our lives and are kind of relatively near in status to us. So somebody in a low socioeconomic job won't necessarily care what some Wall Street banker thinks of them because they're irrelevant to them. They care what the person over the road thinks about them. So that tends to be how we compete for status, is those nearest to us.
Now, this bit that we're about to get into blows me away. I've always read that our happiness as a human being is based on our connection with other human beings. I'm sure you've heard the same thing. But this is not what Will says. Will says that it is impossible to be happy if we lack a connection in addition to lacking status.
Not just psychologically unhappy, we also become physically unwell. So it's quite well known these days that a lack of connection, feeling of loneliness, is extremely bad for your health. By some estimates, it's worse than smoking, which is just an extraordinary finding. But it's also the same a lack of status. So if you have a lack of status, you're more likely to die early. You've got a higher chance of dying early because your subconscious brain, your human brain, decides there's something wrong. There's something wrong with your life. There's something going badly wrong with your existence. So it switches you into this kind of high stress state, which is very bad for the body long term. So we can become very physically unwell and die sooner if we are chronically lacking in status, and also chronically lacking in connection. It's evolution wanting us to be a successful member of a collaborative group. They're both essential. We've got to connect into that group and serve that group.
Yeah, and I don't know, this is such a simple question, but I'm trying to understand why.
Yeah.
Like you go back to, say, a clan of 50, out on the Serengeti, and high status in that type of clan would be what? Maybe what's
a great storyteller, a great sorcerer, a great finder of honey. Honey was, okay. So some people were really good at finding honey and getting it off the bees, So you're offering value, but also virtuous. You could be courageous. You could be somebody that knows the rules of the tribe, knows the sacred laws of the tribe, and follows them and enforces them. That's so that's a virtue route to status.
So let's say that I was the best in the clan of grabbing honey out the tree. I could go in there, snatch that honey from the bees. How does that then equate to me having more sexual partners?
Well, because,
or options around
because it's the
sexual
same
partners?
today. It's like being a great footballer, or it's like being Taylor Swift. Like people look up to you, they go, "God, that person's amazing. Did you see how that honey he's got?" And then you bring the honey in, and everybody goes, "Oh, wow, look at the honey we've got. Thank you." And you know, it's no different. It would have been no different then to it is today. Yeah. We've got this automatic status reward system built into us. That when we offer value to other people, unless there's some sort of envy or some toxic competition going on, other people generally, guys, that's great, amazing, well done, you know, congratulations, and they feel they reward you with status, and also you feel better in yourself. You know, you've got this self-signaling system where you feel better about yourself, so everything just feels better when you offer value to the group.
I see it. So we have evolved, to believe that our identity is wrapped into our status.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so without having status, then how do we view our identity?
Well, your identity is partly based on, it's partly based on the group you're connected with, but also the status that you've earned within that group. I mean, you know, so when I'm talking about how humans compete with reputation, another way of saying that is humans compete with identity. When we're being dominant, we're fighting in the physical realm. It's body against body, flesh against flesh. But when we're competing in the kind of prestige realm for competence and virtue, that's our identities. You know, so that's an identity thing. We all want to have a healthy, connected, high status identity. That's how we measure the health of our identity. Is how connected am I, and how much status do I have? It's those two things.
And even on the connection, is it more so about meaningful connection? Because I've wondered about this when you look at, you know, unfortunately, when we look at suicide rates, you look at the mass increase in the number of suicides, especially in the West, namely in the UK and the United States. And we do operate in a loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
But I often look and say, okay, well, you know, these are people who have lots of quote unquote friends on social media. They're interacting with people in real life, but I feel as if they're missing meaningful connection. So do you feel like there's a distinction between connection and meaningful connection?
I think one of the major problems we have in modern societies is the size of our groups. So we've evolved to play status games in the context of a group of around 30 to 50 people. That was the size of the group that we would have evolved, you know, for hundreds of generations within. So when you're a member of a group of between 30 to 50 people, it wouldn't have been an unusual experience for you to feel invaluable, you know, because you were invaluable. There's not many people around to figure out, to try and solve the problems of existence for the group, to get the food, to get the security, to get the camps up, to get the fire lit, all that stuff. You were essential. So we've evolved to want to feel indispensable. But how often these days do we feel indispensable? Almost never. I mean, in the business world, it's a cliche. No one's indispensable. It's almost a badge of honor. But the bigger the human group gets, the more diffuse it gets, the harder it is to feel genuine connection. Certainly the harder it is to feel any status within a group. I mean, you know, most corporations, I mean, how big are they? You know, like enormous.
Right.
So I think that's part of the fundamental problem we've got of modern advanced societies is our status games are just massive. And so our identities constantly feel, you know, I think of it, I call it identity stress. We feel identity stress.
Okay.
So identity stress is when we feel that our connection is under stress, or our sense of status is under stress. And so so on social media, for example, you're constantly feeling identity stress because one person says a nasty little comment about you. It doesn't matter who you are. Oh God, you know, that's you feel it. And you know, you talk, you know, quite rightly about the quality of our connection. You know, a relationship over social media is not the same as a relationship in real life. It's certainly not the same as the deep relationship you would have had with a tribal, you know, partner who you're living side by side with in this relatively small group in the Serengeti or wherever it may have been.
Yes.
So I think that's part of the problem. And then there's another even kind of more fundamental issue, which is that the brain doesn't really want us to be happy. That's one of the terrible things. The brain wants us to keep pursuing status. It wants to keep us pushing, because it doesn't want us to be just completely happy, because then we're just going to stop trying to exist. We're going to stop trying to earn status and be valuable. So it wants to keep us in a slight state of dissatisfaction. So we're constantly pushing. But I certainly think in the West, one of the big problems is the size of our groups, how hard it is to earn status in the modern market economies.
What I find so interesting about identity stress, as Will mentions, is that it's something that we all face, but we don't need to. One of the best researchers on connection, in my opinion, is Dr. Robin Dunbar. I've read all of his books, in particular, Friends is one of my favorites. And Robin Dunbar has created something that's called the 150 rule, or the Dunbar number. And this is, in essence, how many people we can sustain in our lives and have a meaningful connection with. And he says that it's roughly 150. We have our inner circle of our BFFs, maybe there's 5 or 10 of those, and we have our next rung of people, maybe 50. You have the people that you work with that you have a strong connection with, maybe you don't like, right? But you still have a connection with, you have a meaningful connection. These are the people that, in essence, we should suffer or not suffer identity stress with. But the challenge is when we go out to the 151st, to the 200th person. These are the people who are following us on social media. These are the people who we are interacting with, who we truly have no true connection with. This is something that we have to pay close attention to, because the more emphasis we place on the people outside of that Dunbar rule, the more doom and gloom we will bring to our lives.
It's always going to be really hard for us to feel invaluable. It's always going to be hard for us to feel securely connected. It's always going to be hard for us to feel, status is never really secure, but it's always going to be very easy for us to be very insecure about our sense of status, because the modern market economies work against those. They kind of work with them in a way, because modern market economies reward status with money, and all that stuff. But it becomes ever harder to really feel any kind of security in your level of status, especially with the advent of social media. One of the things I do in my spare time is I volunteer with the Samaritans, which is the hotline for people who are often feeling suicidal. So I spend a lot of time speaking to people who are actively suicidal. And in my experience at the Samaritans, there are 3 main reasons why people want to end their lives. And first reason is they're in chronic pain. So people are suffering from chronic pain, understandably, they just find it very hard to carry on. Recently bereaved people I speak very often to. Recent bereavement is obviously sort of psychological torture. But by far the main reason is talk about identity stress. I could term it as identity failure.
Yes.
People who are chronically lacking in either connection or status, usually both. And not only are they lacking in connection status, they feel they're trapped. They feel that their life has got to a place where it's impossible for them to restore any sense of connection or any sense of status. And this, in my experience as a Samaritan, this is by far the most common reason why people want to choose to end their lives, is because the identity failure. I'm unloved and I'm worthless.
Right.
You hear it again and again and again and again.
Right. This is a major concern, too, for one area of work that I'm in, because I do a lot of reality television.
Yes.
And I see this all the time on these shows, Married at First Sight, Love Island, et cetera, is that you have someone who's unknown. They go on this massive show, build up a significant platform, hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. They're on television every night, and then it's taken away. And you could see that their status has now, they've been humiliated, to your point. Status has been removed. And how do they combat that? Because I've also seen you write that you can't maintain status forever.
No.
So all status has a time limit to it.
Yeah.
So what does someone do in that position? Actually, all of us, who we know that there's a time limit to our status. How do we manage the loss of our status?
Well, I think the first thing is recognizing is exactly your point. The sudden accrual of massive status is really dangerous. We haven't evolved to be a celebrity. That's why most celebrities are a bit mad, because our brains are designed to crave status without limit, really. People always want more and more and more and more. When psychologists try to find the place where our desire for status levels out. They can't find it. It doesn't level out. Other things like our need for power levels out, but not status. We always want more and more and more. We're never satisfied. I think it was Carl Jung that talked about making the unconscious conscious. Yes. And that's what I'm trying to do with the book, like The Status Game. It's like saying, look, all this is you. This is your life. You know, part of it is the pursuit of status. And a lot of it is just illusionary. You know, like a lot of the things, a lot of the problems that you have in your day-to-day life are imagined assaults on your status. So if you lose your like if you get annoyed on the road behind a car because someone's cut you up, nothing's happened. You know, they've been a bit rude to you. The reason that you're reacting in a negative way, if you are reacting in a negative way, is because your brain is going, that's an assault on my status and I will not have it. So there's great power in being able to see that in yourself and go, oh, this is just ego, you know, just forget about it. It's ridiculous. So I think that's a big part of it. So you know, and the brain is designed to make it feel very real and like this stuff really matters. But as I say in the book, you can't keep your status. You can't put it in a box and say, that's my status. Yeah. Nobody can touch it now. It's mine. Because status is given to us by other people. So you've just got to understand that and have a much more kind of free and kind of loose and philosophical relationship with it, I think.
And then is it important too, because you mentioned your volunteer work.
Yeah.
Is it important to try to then gain status in other ways, in new ways?
Yeah, so I think it's important to play multiple status games, especially when you get to middle age and beyond. I think in your 20s, there's a good argument for choosing one status game and just throwing everything at it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you know, I think in your 20s, you're building the rest of your life. And if you get good at something in your 20s, you're set. You know, probably, you know, the chances are you're set. But I think once you get to middle age is when you tend to peak, and you know, 40s and 50s, unfortunately, status tends to decline in various ways, you know, physically, but also, you know, professionally often for people. So I think it's very important to play multiple status games. Sometimes that comes naturally. If you have children, I don't have children, but as a parent, you're designed to start playing status games through your children. So your children's status is kind of your status. You're connected in that way. But, you know, this is why hobbies are so important. People sort of think hobbies are so silly and men in their sheds with their, you know, with their train sets or whatever. But that's a status game. They wanting to build the best train set, you know, like let them, you know, like that's great. If that's something that someone can get joy out of and feel like I'm really good at building train sets, then build the train set. That's kind of what hobbies are for. There are ways that we can add meaning to our lives and feel good about ourselves in ways that aren't about career.
You know, Will, what you just said there is blowing my mind, but it's connecting with this whole idea of in your 20s, you know, focus on one status game, right? Because you can set yourself up.
Yeah.
And I feel as if the most successful people I know in terms of monetarily in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s, they've played one status game their entire career, and they have very little connection. They've no friends, right? But they've built up the status, and I could see that they played that all the way through. But my fear is then if that's all they have, what then happens when it's ripped away?
Yeah,
I've got a very exciting announcement. But first, I want to ask you if you know which part of dating most of us worry about. If you guessed creating lasting relationships, you were right. We all want to find a partner to grow old with and to share in life's experiences. That's why I'm delighted to announce today an exciting new podcast partnership with Tinder, where a relationship starts every 3 seconds. Now, I've worked as Tinder's global relationship insights expert for a few years, and during that time, I've seen firsthand that lasting relationships form using their app. Each week, I'll share everything I've learned about what makes the foundations for a great relationship and how to make it last. Tinder is for all types of relationships, and I truly believe it has the best tools to help you find love. It starts with a swipe. So download Tinder today, and let's find you a great relationship.
Yeah.
I was reading on the interpersonal theory around suicide and how if you look at media, sports, entertainment, those finance, these are areas with, in particular, men who have the highest rates of suicide as a result of losing it all. So is that happening because they played that one game all the way through?
Yeah, and they've not hedged. They've not hedged. I mean, that's why I joined the Samaritans. I mean, it wasn't a selfless act. I wrote the book and realized I was not following my own advice. I've been a writer since I'm in my 20s. I have no children. I don't do anything else. I have almost no friends. So I've got to do something else. And I would never have been the kind of person to be a volunteer without having written that book. And I immediately found it very rewarding. Even when I was being trained before I was on the phones, I found it very rewarding. And what I realized was I thought it was going to be a status thing where it's like, it's a different way of feeling good about myself, but actually it ended up being a connection thing. Like when you're on the phone with somebody who's in need, even though it's part of the Samaritans training, you're not allowed to talk about yourself. You're anonymous and you're not allowed to share about yourself. If the call is successful, you create a very powerful connection with the person on the other end of the phone by listening very intently to them and drawing them out of themselves. And it's obviously hopefully helpful to them. Usually it is helpful to them, but it's also, you leave a shift feeling like I leave a shift feeling like I have a very powerful connection to the human family in some way. Like I'm never going to speak to that person again, but I feel connected to people in a very profound way. So that was the surprise for me about the Samaritans. It ended up not being about status. It's much more about connection for me. And it's really, I used to feel lonely a lot and I don't feel lonely anymore. And that's because of the Samaritans.
What do we do if we're in a scenario where we have a brother, a father, a friend who is male and has lost status? They feel humiliated. We know they do. What can we do to support them?
I mean, it's not rocket science. You make them feel better. I mean, one of the things that's really not astonished me at the Samaritans, but I find really powerful is that when I'm on the phone to somebody who is chronically lacking in status, as they're talking, I'm thinking of things I can say to them towards the end of the call that are going to build them back up again. Okay. And they have to be authentic things. It can't be like this California thing of, oh my God, you're amazing, because
your California accent is good. This is LA. It's LA.
Yeah, okay. But people can spot that a mile away. We've got this bullshit detector, humans. We're very good at spotting that stuff.
I thought this was really interesting because on these Samaritan calls, Will is quite literally touching on both the fundamentals that humans need to be happy, and that's connection and status. And ultimately, what Will is doing is what we all should be doing with each other, and that is being kind. And when we are kind to others, we elevate their status. So all of this got me thinking, how has finding connection and status been affected by dating apps?
Yeah, I think the dating apps are, I think the dating apps are designed really for hookups. You've got to. I think it's interesting to separate out sex and love.
Okay.
I think when you're looking for sex and hookups, status tends to be the most important thing. There's that meme at the moment. The woman wants a man in finance, 6'5", trust fund, blue eyes, whatever it is. It's that. She wants a high status male.
Yes.
Men want beautiful. Whatever the men want. What the men want. And so it's all about the status, really. It's also about it's this raw competition for status, and it kind of reduces on the apps to this kind of very basic. How do you get that across to people? Like if you meet somebody face to face. You naturally emit huge volumes, this enormous cloud of social information swaps between people, most of which we're completely unconscious of. We read so much.
Yes.
Other people's body language, their tone, the smells that we can't consciously smell. It's so much goes on between two people that is valuable. But you don't get that on the app. So you're reduced to having these pictures of yourself and a small amount of text. And you end up doing things like, women like it if you've got a dog, so I'm going to have a dog. It becomes so reductive, and I get the sense that everyone's trying to chase the same kind of ideal algorithm. Like, what do you say in this bit? What do you say in this bit? So I don't envy the app era at all. Like it's especially for men who tend to be the ones saying pick me. It must be so very difficult if you're not. Like an 8 or an above out of 10, it must be really hard.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of the guys are walking around now, with dogs that are not theirs. Also, fish has become a thing.
Really?
Big fish.
Yeah, God.
You can't be a small fish. You have to hold a massive, look what I caught. Look at this thing.
It's just so funny.
Yeah.
But also, I feel sorry for these poor people. Like, it must be, really hard to try and stand out from that enormous crowd of other men holding fish.
It is. It's incredibly hard. And I wonder if that then reshapes then our pursuit of status. Because, I mean, we're joking about the dog, but people with dogs actually have higher click-throughs.
Yeah.
Right? So as a result, does that then, then the dogs become the popular, that's the, everyone goes out and adopts the dog. Is that, do you think that our behavior in real life is being shaped by dating apps and social media in our pursuit for a partner?
I would imagine that you can catfish as much as you want on the app, but when you actually meet in real life, it's like reality shows. Like in the first 2 weeks of Big Brother or Love Island, everyone's on best behavior. But it's always after the 2 week, you see the real person. Like, and that's when the fun begins. Like, it always gets good after about 2 weeks, those shows. And I'm sure it's the same with dating, where you can try and present to be the ultimate, person, or this kind of fake ideal model of a person to the person you're trying to impress, but it can't last. It can't last.
No. I always say, and it's actually Chris Rock. He says that when you first meet someone, you meet their representative.
Yeah.
And then later, 2 weeks later, you meet the real person.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. Chris Rock. Yeah, he's great.
All right. So another one was, how do displays of status differ between trying to hook up and looking for a real long-term relationship, almost when you're talking about love and sex?
Well, I think one of the things about status, because you mentioned Chris Rock, and I just made me think of another thing that Chris Rock said, which is like, he's brilliant. And he says that when two people meet and the guy goes back to his guy friends and says, I've met somebody amazing. And the guys say, what does she look like? Yes. And when the girls say, so I've met this guy, amazing, and the girls say, what does he do? And I think that's so true. And again, that speaks to the different ways that men and women tend to measure status, and tend to value kind of the status of the opposite sex. I think with love, it tends to be less about status and much more about connection. And I think in a specific way. So there's a very fascinating area of psychological research which they call shared reality. Okay. And it's quite a new area that's being looked at, but it's fascinating. And the basic idea of shared reality is that we all have this kind of weird model of the world, idea of what the world is like, that is uniquely ours, because everybody is unique. They've got unique experience, unique values, unique status games they're playing, unique history, lived experience, all of that stuff, unique genes. And so what we're always looking for, again, it goes back to us being this highly collaborative ape, cooperative ape. We're looking for people who experience the world in a fundamentally similar way to us, because those are the people that we can cooperate with and collaborate with in order to build a better life for ourselves. Okay. And so that's true whether we're looking for friends, whether we're looking for people to work with side by side, but especially people who are looking to form a long-term relationship with. One of the sets of experience which I find fascinating has found that when you connect with somebody, when you subconsciously realize this person sees the world in the same way that I do, you start changing each other's reality. So your guard comes down, and that person starts to change the way that you see the world, and you start to change the way that person sees the world. Like, I remember when I first met Farah, my wife, one of the things that I admired about her was she was much better in social situations than I was. So I would struggle in parties and have terribly terrible at small talk, and often come across as rude because I didn't know what to say. So people would think I was standoffish, and it was a problem. But Farah had this massive facility to be charming and engaging, and without even consciously wanting to do it, I found myself copying her. So I would do what she did in social situations, have the same mannerisms, the same laugh, the same patterns of eye contact. And I was writing about this recently, and I realized I don't even remember what those things were that I was copying. And that's because they've become authentically part of me now. So like, in a very real way, a part of my wife has become part of me. So she's changed me. And, I'm sure that if you speak to her, she would say that things that I've done have changed her in other ways. Yes. So we've become this, over 20 plus years of being together, we've become this deeply connected, meshed kind of being, like couple. Before I before I did this research, I would feel a bit embarrassed because there are often times when we say the same thing at the same time, have the same thought. And I was going to say that, and you feel a bit embarrassed when that happens. It's like, that's so weird that we were about to say the same thing. But now I've done this research into shared reality. That's a sign of a really solid, strong relationship. We are experiencing the world in the same way. So that's what you're looking for, I think, in a long-term relationship. Somebody who you can literally your experience of the world meshes and starts to change each other for the better. I think that's how I would describe it.
So this is a key point that Will is making. When he's discussing shared reality, I think another way to look at this is how our values lead to our emotional availability, which ultimately leads to our vulnerability, which then allows us to connect at a meaningful level, but more important than that, to display our true selves. And this is what I mean. Having shared values means that we see the world as the same as our partner, which is very important. When we see the world as our partner sees it, then we're able to connect with them, not just physically, but also emotionally to the highest degree. When we're connected emotionally to the highest degree, we feel safe. When we are safe, that's when we're most willing to be vulnerable. When we are vulnerable, we are our true selves. I think this is another way to look at shared reality. Now, in my notes for this interview, I saw that Will has written about how all of us are always in detect and connect mode. But this makes me think, do we detect and connect in the same way if we're interested in a committed relationship as we do if we're interested in just casual sex? Let's find out.
Humans are constantly, because we're like these individual cells in this super organism. So we're constantly going around our lives looking for people to connect with. So I call it, we're in this detect and connect mode.
Okay.
So we're detecting, is this person like me in any other way? And that's why humans are so obsessed with their appearance. One of the reasons why we spend so much money on our appearance, and we always want to look a certain way, and not just neat and tidy, but we express who we are in our dress in certain ways. Because we are broadcasting out to the human superorganism. These are my values. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe. And so we are not only attracting like-minded people, but repelling people who are, not like us. So that's why that's a big reason why humans are so obsessed with appearance. That's why we spend so much money on clothes and cars and the house and whatever it might be. But we're constantly broadcasting out facts about ourselves to other humans, and that's because we're constantly looking. It's this detect and connect mode. We're detecting like-minded people and seeking to connect with them. And of course, when we do connect with them, we feel great. And that's especially true with our romantic partner, because as they, that collaboration, the ultimate core. I mean, my wife and I don't have children. We don't want. That's a conscious decision we've made. We never wanted children. But the ultimate cause of us being together for 20 years is that evolution wants us to be in a collaboration in order to raise children, to have and raise children. That's what it wants us to do. And it's a hard thing to raise kids. So you need to have a really solid shared reality, a solid relationship, a solid connection.
Yes. So this is this idea of detection, though. So you're saying we're always constantly, we're detecting, and we're looking for someone like us.
Yeah,
that's what we're looking for.
Yeah,
and are we looking to push away everyone not like us?
Yeah, we repel those people.
We repel that. That's a scary thought as well.
Yeah,
it's sad.
Yeah, it is a bit sad. I mean, it is a bit sad, but it's one of those things that it is. I mean, so it's. Unfortunately, humans are naturally xenophobic. We're not naturally racist, but we are naturally xenophobic. We're groupish. We like to be surrounded by people like us, with like-minded people, because those are the people that we can collaborate with in order to make a better life for ourselves. Yeah.
I mean, even connecting the detection with the connection in status. Once I moved here to the UK, so I've been a resident now for the last 3 years.
Okay.
Proud resident.
Yes,
I love the UK.
Great.
The class system blew me away.
Right, really, yeah.
We don't have the same structure of class in the United States. And once I got here, I realized that, many people move within the same class circle.
Yeah.
Even romantic partners.
Yeah.
I've worked with many people, many clients, and they have felt as if they did not want to be in a relationship with someone of a different class.
God, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so is that part of that detection,
Yeah.
I would imagine, is classes baked into that as
Yeah,
well?
yeah. It could be that. It's any way we think that person is people. I call it people like us. We always want to be with people like us, and in Britain historically, class has been a big part of that. Unfortunately, yeah, absolutely, it has. That's part of our history.
So what about, concepts like Carol Dweck's open-mindedness and, there's so many people say, I take people for who they are. How do we, I guess I'm going with, how do we actively combat this?
I think the good news, there is some good news from the shared reality stuff. So previously, lots of psychologists agree with what people generally think often, which is that people are, we're xenophobic, humans are tribal, and we, so it's class, it's race, it's gender, all these identity divisions which seem kind of insuperable. But there was one study that I read about recently, which I just thought was wonderful, where they tried to figure out what was more powerful in bonding people together. Was it shared reality or was it tribe? So they got these people together in a lab. They told the person, "Oh, this person, by the way, sitting next to you is from the same town as you." So that's a tribal connection. And then there was somebody sitting on the other side of them, and they were there to watch some sort of presentation. And they made the presenters speak in a really stupid voice, like a really weird voice like that. So like the person who was the participant started giggling at this voice, and the person next to them went, and so they were laughing together at the same thing, but the person from the same town wasn't. So the question is, who do they feel more connected to? The person who they shared that moment of humor with, or the tribal one? And it was the humor one. That basic idea that I see the world in the same way that you see the world can trump race, gender, tribe. There are other studies that also back this up. There's a study they wrote about in the Status Game where they looked at racial prejudice in a team context. And they find that if you get somebody of a racial minority in a team initially, the kind of racial prejudice effect will kick in, and there may be some discrimination against the person of color. But very quickly, once you start identifying as a team and everyone starts putting together, that all washes away. And what matters to everybody is how good is this person in terms of offering value to this team. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. We're stuck in this identity politics era still at the moment, where people are very, very conscious of race boundaries and gender boundaries and all of that stuff. But I think there's good reason to feel that we are, as a species, better than that. That we can overcome these things, that shared reality is much more important, and things like competence and status games are more important, that once we start working together and offering value to each other, we forget all that stuff about race and gender and sex and all that stuff. So I think that's a reason to be optimistic.
Yeah. So you've mentioned your wife a few times, all right, and you've also mentioned that you've consciously chosen not to have children. I would imagine that, and you've talked about how not some people, I think children are used as a status game.
Yeah.
Right. So I find it interesting that, you've studied status game and you've opted out of this major status game of children. Could I ask, what were the reasons? Why?
There were two main reasons why. The first reason really is that both my wife and I are very focused on our career. And we realized that if my wife had children, because we were trying for a bit before we really figured out what we wanted, one of us would have to give up our career. That would have been me, because my wife was more successful than I was at the time. So it was obviously going to be me, because she was bringing in more money at the time. And I didn't really want to do that. And also I felt that I worried that what kind of a father was I going to be? Because I was a journalist, so I'd loved writing. I was a photographer, I loved taking pictures, I loved traveling, and I would have to give all of that for maybe 18 years in order to just sit at home, watch Peppa Pig or whatever it is. and I was going to do that. I was going to sell my camera. I just went into this kind of automatic okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I'm going to stop doing this. And it's like, do I really want to do this? And what kind of a husband am I going to be in 10, 15 years' time? Am I going to get resentful? Is it going to impact the way that I'm going to be able to raise a child? Is it going to impact the way that I'm going to be a good husband to Farah if I feel like I've had to sacrifice lots that I care about in order to do this? That was a big worry for me. The other thing, to be honest, is that I didn't have I didn't have a happy childhood myself. So when I thought about children, it was never with a very positive feeling. My childhood was easily the most unhappy period of my life, and I worried about recreating that environment for whoever, for a child of my own. I didn't know, was I going to be like my dad was? Was I going to be like my mum was? I would hope not, but did I? I don't know. So that was the other reason.
Could you expand on that?
Well, what to say? I think I was probably a very difficult child to be fair to my parents. I was very disruptive at school. I didn't work. I was very bad with authority. I was just not interested at all in working. I failed all my exams. I didn't go to university. I've never been to university. So that's what they were dealing with. I would have been diagnosed ADHD these days. Like I was on Ritalin, I think, at one point. I didn't do any good for me though. Yeah. Wow. From my perspective, it was quite a tough upbringing. They were old school Victorian English, Roman Catholic parents. So I found it a very harsh, sometimes frightening world. Being at home, I was deeply unhappy. I was usually on the verge of running away, or I'd spend most of my time hiding in my bedroom. Okay. So it was very unhappy. Yeah, it was a very unhappy childhood.
Did you feel loved?
No, not at all.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Why you made that decision?
Yeah, and I hope. I hope. I mean, I remember one time saying to my brother-in-law about the kids thing. We've got dogs. I was having this conversation. I worried that I would be like my dad, and he was like, "But look how you are with your dog. Like, there's no way you'd ever be like that man." And I've got two brothers, and they're wonderful fathers, very loving. They really have a beautiful relationship with their children. So so maybe I would have been wrong. I hope I would have been wrong. But the fear of it was just too much.
Do you see that is there any connection between not feeling loved as a child and the success you've had in your career?
Oh, huge. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's that sense of having to prove yourself. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I think I've had a disordered relationship with connection generally. Before Farah, my love relationships were very unhappy.
Oh wow.
I was very insecure. I would get quite jealous. Always convinced that my partner was going to run off with somebody else, and was very unhappy. And I think that I suspect, although you can never tell, that a lot of that is rooted in my childhood of just not having an experience of feeling loved. Yes. So my fundamental experience of the world was it was insecure, that it was dangerous, that if I put a step wrong, I was being told regularly when I was growing up that they were going to put me into care, that I was going to end up in prison. So that was how I felt like, the world was this fundamentally dangerous place. And so when I actually became adolescent and started falling in love with people, I didn't know how it worked, and I didn't feel worthy of love. I felt unlovable. So that was a problem for lots of my early relationships. It was very difficult.
So for someone listening, watching, who feels exactly how you did, what do you suggest to them?
I was a journalist at the time, and I asked that question to Ozzy Osbourne, because Ozzy Osbourne was talking about, as I've been talking about, how he used to be this jealous and I said to him, I'm like that now. What do I do, Ozzy? And he said, you've got to sort yourself out. You've got to get your own house in order. I don't know what exact words he used. And you know, like I couldn't trust myself. And so I found it hard to trust other people. And so I took that away. And I used to be a very heavy drinker. I was an alcoholic, really. And what I did was I stopped drinking. And when I stopped drinking, a huge source of kind of self-loathing was removed from me, and I started to like myself more. And then that changed my relationship with women. I stopped feeling unlovable and started feeling like it was possible to be loved. And then, you know, like I always say with Farah, if I had never stopped drinking, she wouldn't have gone anywhere near me, because I was a complete mess when I was drinking. And she would have been like, I'm not going anywhere near that dude. Jesus, he's a mess. It changed my relationship with myself, and it changed my relationship with the women that I was dating, certainly. And it began with stopping drinking.
So you changed the relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And that allowed you to change the relationship with those around you.
Yeah, that's it. Because I think it's, you know, I was in therapy when I was a teenager, and you go round and round in circles in therapy and they go, yeah, you know, it's all of your parents' fault. Okay. Maybe it was their fault, but maybe I was also a difficult child, whatever. But what are you going to do with that? How does it change you, that knowledge? Even if you could prove it was true with a scientific study, or like God could give you a certificate saying it was the fault of your parents, that's why you're a bad boyfriend. What are you going to do with it? Right. Like it's not really useful information. It's just it's a story that may or may not be true. If you want to feel lovable, I think fundamentally you need to. It sounds such a cliche, but you do need to start loving yourself. And I think I always resisted that idea, because it feels like an invitation to narcissism. It feels like, oh, I'm so wonderful, you know. But it's not about that. I think, you know, I wrote about this in Selfie. I think it's actually, the answer isn't about loving yourself. It's about accepting yourself, and that's a very different thing. I think loving yourself. I mean, I always think about reality TV. You get that trope in reality TV where you get some obnoxious idiot on Love Island or Big Brother, and when they're confronted about their bad behavior, they go, "I'm just being myself. I'm just being real.
Yeah,
I'm just being real.
Yeah.
And if you can't take me, then and it's like, that's not good enough, you know. And I think that's where this idea of authenticity goes a bit wrong. That idea of self-love, as long as I'm being authentic, you can't criticize me, I'm uncriticizable. That's a mistake. Yes. I think it's about self-acceptance. It's about the understanding that you are flawed. Yes. That you are never going to be perfect, that you are a particular kind of person with a particular kind of personality and a particular kind of good qualities, but also a particular kind of bad qualities, that for the rest of your life, you're probably going to end up making the same mistakes again and again and again and again. But you need to be your own best friend. You need to accept those flaws. And when you do get those things wrong, have the humility to apologize to other people, have the humility to say to yourself, you fucked up there, buddy. Please don't do that again. You know, so that's who I am these days. I would never say that I love myself, but I accept myself. And I remember somebody saying to me once, you've got to be your own best friend. And I just thought, you know what, it sounds banal, but it's so true. And I try and be my own best friend now, where like when I do get things wrong, I make a mistake, I lose my temper, or I embarrass myself in some way. Like, I'm critical to myself. That's not good enough. You've got to do better. But I'm also kind to myself, you know, and I think that's the big difference. That's what we should be going towards. It's not about loving yourself. It's about accepting your broken, sorry, half-assed, but trying to do better self. That's where I think we should be trying to be.
If I had a collection plate, I'd just pass it over right there. I said that you just delivered. Right. I agree. I absolutely agree. We always end with the final question.
Okay.
What is the most meaningful conversation that you've ever had, and who was it with?
I spent most of my career having very meaningful conversations with people. That's a difficult thing. Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing that just popped into my mind, which I think is a really important conversation I had with my wife before we got married. And I can't remember what prompted it. Actually, I do remember what prompted it. I was writing about long-term relationships, the science and psychology of long-term relationships. And I'd been interviewing lots of experts, like scientists who study what makes a good long-term relationship. And I remember so my wife and I, we lived in Australia at the time. We were lying on the beach, and I was saying to her, look, because we'd got engaged, and I said to her, look, when we get married, the fact is that we're going to be attracted to other people. That's a fact. It's going to happen. But what you can't do is do anything about that thing. So we've got to agree, this idea that there's nothing wrong with a harmful bit of flirtation, there is something wrong with that. It's fine to be attracted to other people. It's natural to be attracted to other people. But the moment you do anything about that, it sets off this kind of chain reaction, because you're going to like smile and then they're going to smile back. And then you're going to want another smile. And it was that understanding of that's how affairs happen. That's how that happens. It's with that smile. It begins with that little smile. And I remember that being a very important conversation to me, because I feel like I've never been anywhere near like having an affair or anything like that. And I think it's because I did that. I had those valuable conversations with those scientists who told me that the neuroscience of this is like a dopamine thing with attraction, and it's a chain reaction. And so I think that's been very protective of our marriage, because I remember Farah going, you're right about that. Like that's a really important kind of insight. And we've both of us have held true to that over the course of our marriage, that don't be ashamed if you're attracted to other people, because it's natural, but just beware. Don't do anything about that thing, or if you can, remove yourself from that situation as much as you possibly can. So I think that was a very meaningful conversation for me, and I think it's had a big impact on our marriage.
Will, thank you.
No, thank you.
It's been epic, and I cannot wait for the next book. I've watched how many years are between each of your books. We're due a new book, I know, very soon.
In February, yeah.
In February.
Yeah.
Right, I'm ready for it.
Great. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you.
Thank you. Every episode, I'm going to give you my top 5 key takeaways from the conversation in an effort to make your life more fulfilling and your relationships stronger. Here's what stood out to me in today's episode. Number 1, status is about feeling valued and respected by others, especially those closest to us. So it's important to reflect on whether you're moving in the right direction to gain the status that you ultimately want from the people who really matter. Number 2, lacking status and connection can lead to psychological and physical health issues. This means giving both your work and your relationships equal attention, as just one isn't enough to make us happy. Number 3, modern ways of connecting, such as through social media, make it harder to feel meaningfully connected with others. This is why we should make sure we're not spending too much time outside of that Dunbar number of 150 friends. This means taking time to step away from social media and connect in the real world. And number 4, exploring new avenues for status and fulfillment is important, especially as we reach middle age and beyond. In your younger years, it can be beneficial to pour all of your energy into mastering a particular skill or career path to build a strong foundation. However, as you get older, maintaining a sense of identity, connection, and status requires branching out into new areas, whether through hobbies, volunteer work, or alternative sources of meaning and validation. Number 5, self-acceptance rather than self-love is key to overcoming insecurities. It's about understanding that you're inherently flawed and you'll never be perfect. It's about learning from experiences, having the humility to apologize when you need to, and both being honest with yourself while accepting that we can and will make mistakes. I want to thank you for listening to this conversation with Will today. Much love and respect.